Join us on this thrilling ride towards better health on WESN Content Capital.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
WESN.
This is 10 questions. We welcome everyone. Mr. Ravi Bhargavan Maharaj, he's our guest on this edition of the program. He's a social and political commentator of the first order. We're calling the segment Applause from Washington. One of the most prolific and materially diverse conversants one could meet in the current and ongoing discourse about American hegemony and the situation in Trinidad and Tobago. Of course, American hegemony in the region. And in the Caribbean, he has been applauded by high-ranking people in the U.S. Capitol. He's agreed to talk with us, the attendant feelings coming out of that. Ravi, good to see you, and thanks for coming on.
Hi, good morning, Annie. Thanks for having me as usual, and good morning to all your viewers and listeners this morning.
All right, let me start by asking you, how was your carnival, if you participated?
It was good. It was quiet. We ended up spending some time down south and taking any vibes out there, but it was relatively good. I hope that the same could be said for you as well.
Well, certainly. Quite very, very good. So let's talk about the issue that you'd sent us this piece saying that what you wrote at the time a couple of weeks ago, you got applause from Washington, from the center of you'd say power in this part of the world. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, sure. I mean, it is very hard and very difficult for voices outside of the U.S. to be recognized and to have any real significance or influence within Washington and within Congress in the U.S. And so for this to be recognized, I think, it's something, it signals that, the U.S. is willing to have these voices be heard when there's something meaningful to say. And, that people can have an influence on what's taking place, especially as Trinidad and Tobago is partnering so heavily with the U.S. in the drug enforcement operations that are taking place in the Caribbean Sea, what is going on in Venezuela, and in terms of the energy cooperation between Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela and the U.S. in terms of oil and gas exploration. So all of these things are taking place, and I think, to have that voice and to be given the opportunity to be heard at that level signals that the US is willing again to have these voices enter into the conversation of what's taking place, and it gives us here more of visibility and more influence of what's taking place in Washington as these things continue to progress.
All right, so give us a sense of what it is you said, and then talk about the responses from Washington and from the officials who responded to your take.
Well, the statement that I put out was part of a larger bill, which was an appropriations bill, which had recently been passed in Congress. And the section of the bill that I was speaking to directly has to do with the subcommittee led by Mario Diaz-Balart, who's a congressman from Florida. And his overview is basically what's taking place right now in the Caribbean Sea and funding that's going towards Operation Southern Spear, which is the U.S. military intervention and overseeing of the drug narcoterrorism that is taking place in the Caribbean Sea. All of these operations are being overseen by the subcommittee headed by Mario Diaz-Balart. And so basically what I was doing is just kind of speaking to this, and that opinion was used by the subcommittee and by the appropriations committee to kind of introduce the bill into Congress and to be an explanation of the bill itself in its entirety. And as such, it's actually the first time that someone outside of the US has been able to have their work be published by Congress in this way and to be attached to a bill. And for it to be an appropriations bill as well is something even more significant. So I think, these things are, it marks a time of actual progress for Trinidad and Tobago and for myself, to have this be forever linked to this bill going forward, especially as the US is celebrating its 250th anniversary this year, from their independence in 1776. All of these things are milestones, and I feel very proud to have my name linked with this at this time as well.
What are some of the things you said that would have caused the kind of attention to and then response to by the folks there?
Well, my perspective was one of someone living in the Caribbean Sea and having first-hand experience with what is taking place in Operation Southern Spear. Again, we would have had these, we would have seen the interdictions of narco-terrorists in the Caribbean Sea. We would have had the effect of that being felt directly by us here in Trinidad and Tobago, where we're seeing, fewer drugs, fewer guns being brought into the country because of the security that is being provided by the U.S. military in the region. On top of that, there has been a concerted effort by Washington to try to bring some sort of safety, security, and to just kind of calm down all of the things that were going on in the Caribbean, especially when it relates to Venezuela, where it relates to Cuba, where it relates to Nicaragua, and there was a creeping undercurrent of communism that was coming in. Many people think that, the Chinese intervention has a hand in that as well, because they have been trying to influence countries, politicians through their Road and Belt initiative. So my perspective was basically on all of these things where US plays a role and how we can further continue the collaboration between Trinidad and Tobago, between the Caribbean and the US, in so much as the US is providing us with safety, with security, with stability, and with resources for us to continue as well. So all of these things were discussed. And one of the major things that we spoke about was the fact that even though the US is still giving us this assistance and it is providing us uh, with these unique stability items, you know, they were able to do that while also cutting back, I think it was $9.3 billion from their budget from the previous administration. So they are still being able to save money on their end while still giving us the support and guidance that we need to move forward as well.
What would have been some of the kinds of reactions you got from people who were saying, well, you're not taking into account, people claim that their relatives, some of whom perished in these boats moving between that part of the mainland and us, had nothing to do with drugs, and some people are saying, well, you know, the persons who went missing and who have been presumed dead were fishermen, innocent fishermen, and so on, and that the strikes were vicarious and not quite pointed at addressing drug trafficking as much as they're saying in Washington. Put that in your context, yeah.
Sure. Well, you know that there is a matter that the ACLU in the U.S. is taking up, and they've brought it before the courts. So that matter is moving forward, where they are representing the two families in Trinidad and Tobago who claim to have family members that were killed in these strikes.
Who were fishermen or fisher people.
Well, yeah, but the thing about it, I read the documents that the ACLU put forward, and they are being a little bit generous in what they're saying about the Trinidad government, especially, because, you know, they've said that how the Trinidad government, one, were aware of the location of the strikes and where the strikes took place, but also that the Trinidad and Tobago government had said that there was no involvement between these individuals and the narco-terrorists. Because if you go back into the records, and we would have more of that here because of the news reporting that's going on, you would see that especially this government, Kamala Prasad Desai government, has stated on numerous times that there were reports of Trinidad nationals going into Venezuela or going into Venezuelan territory, in maritime territory, you know, and were being involved in these types of illegal drug trades and illegal gun trades and even human trafficking. So for them to say outright that the government had indemnified all of our fishermen from these types of things, and that is a large part of the case that they're putting forward, I think they may find some problem when they go into the court and try to make that argument. That said, I can't say whether or not how the case will turn out, but I think everyone is looking at it to get a sense of whether or not there was in fact legality and legal cover for the strikes in how they were carried out and what actually was taking place in Trinidad.
Yeah. So to what extent did people contact you or seek to contact you directly? How did the thing work?
No, yeah, they were keeping up to date with my writing and reporting, and I am carried by a lot of news organizations in the US as well who would have been following my previous work, you know. So yeah, they were following my writing, and they had asked if I would like to provide any input into the bill, and you know, I provided them with this. And again, you know, it's the first time I think anyone, well, definitely anyone from Trinidad and Tobago, but I think it may be the first time anyone from outside of the U.S. who isn't a naturalized citizen has been allowed this opportunity to present a document that is being attached to a bill in the U.S. Congress that is been passed and will forever be the records of Congress now.
All right. Tell us a little bit about the substance of the contributions you made to the bill then.
Well, no, I mean, again, it was just basically commentary on what is taking place. I think the bill, again, it has brought a lot of savings to the American people, but it is not, even though it's being touted as an American first bill, and it is something that both Donald Trump and U.S. Congress has made sure to actually solidify the fact that U.S. funds must go to American people first and serve their country first. I think that the level of support, again, that they have put into the bill that they can provide for Trinidad and Tobago and for the region is still astounding. And I think that, we are not losing anything from this bill. Again, they've been able to cut out $9.3 billion from it from the previous administration. But they are still keeping the support mechanisms in place, and they are still being able, again, they still have the U.S. military here providing security and providing safety for the entire Caribbean region. You would have seen as well earlier this month, there was a training exercise in Jamaica where Trinidad and Tobago and other armies, defense forces from the region would have taken place. And it was being coordinated by the U.S. and Jamaican forces, and these types of exercises, they provide support, they provide training for our local forces, and they're really giving us the tools and the ability to protect ourselves, in addition to the supplemental protection that they're providing through the forces in the region as well.
So how do you deal with, how do you relate with, or continue to relate with people here who see things differently and who argue from a different standpoint that you're making? What's the nature of your continuing, if any, dialogue with those among us who take a different position?
No, well, I'll tell you, I had a recent discussion with Gary Aboud, who is a very outspoken person, and he was adamant that, the U.S. is doing what they're doing extrajudiciously, and, these killings are taking place without any warrants, without any oversight and these things. And there are many other people within the country who feel that way. What I will say is that, President Trump especially has been very clear in saying that these drug traffickers, while they may not, and they do kill people, in the first degree way, in drug wars and these types of things, tip wars and stuff. But the number of people that they're killing through the drug trade itself, where narcotics is killing people in the U.S., it's killing people in the region. We in Trinidad and Tobago also have those types of drug wars taking place and gang wars taking place because of it. And so the secondary nature of these murders being taken place that are linked to the drug trade cannot be ignored. So, you're saying on the one hand, yes, people are dying in the strikes, but you're protecting 10 times that amount by getting rid of the drugs and trying to restrict and trying to shut down these cartels, because the number of lives that are being affected are extremely greater than the lives that are being lost in these strikes. And again, nobody's telling people to go out there and to transport the drugs and to be part of the drug trade. They are making that choice for themselves. So really, actually, if they get caught up in it, I mean, that is a decision that they made for themselves.
Yeah, you think it's just probably, well, incidentally, unfortunate that you saw at least a couple of the people who got blown up with these strikes and on the vessels that were, for all intents and purposes, said to be fishing vessels, people in Trinidad and Tobago, probably to an extent say that this person who was blown up on this particular boat or on that particular day was in fact a fisher person.
Well, I'll tell you something.
Yeah.
You know, I was looking at it in June of 2025, and this was months before any strikes had taken place. Prime Minister Kamala Persad had spoken publicly, and she had warned fishermen, she had warned all citizens not to get involved in this, not to venture into Venezuelan territory. And she said, you know, if any of you were to find yourselves there, then the Trinidad and Tobago government would not be able to protect you. That warning was clear. And then after that, you would have seen the military come into the region, and they also gave that warning. They said, look, we are here to attack these narco-terrorists that are traveling on the waters and trying to transport their illegal drugs and whatnot. So, you know, we are here now to bring safety and security to the region. We are here to cut out the trade. We're here to secure the waters. And so all of these things were taking place in full view and with the knowledge of everybody in Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela. So for anyone then to venture out, and they will say, well, you know, we went there for other purposes. We went there for fishing. Trinidad waters are laden with fish. You know, I don't hear any of the fishermen in Trinidad waters, you know, really complaining that they aren't fish to catch, or in Tobago or further up the island. One of the individuals said they went to Venezuela to find job in agriculture. One of the biggest issues in Trinidad and Tobago is that farmers and other people cannot get people to work. So there is work in Trinidad and Tobago to be found if you wanted to find it. So I don't understand why people would leave and go to Venezuela and say, no, we need to go to Venezuela. And again, this is at a time when the migrant crisis was at its peak and when people from Venezuela were leaving because of the harsh conditions. So it's very hard to argue that someone would leave Trinidad and Tobago, which is hosting Venezuelan refugees, to go to Venezuela for opportunities to get employment, a legal employment. I think that's a hard thing to kind of wrap your head around.
To justify.
But again, I can't say for sure, and the matter is before the court, so all of these things will come to light eventually.
Yeah. I'm just curious personally about whether, to what extent you may be invited to go to Washington, D.C. to treat with some of the flavor that has come out of your intervention, if we might call it that.
Well, yeah, I have been invited, and I don't want to say too much, but, you know, I am keeping channels open between myself and Washington to keep working together, to keep collaborating, and we don't know what will come of it, but, you know, it's something that is there, and again, the opportunity isn't only open for me. I think this opens the door for a lot of people, and for not only Trinidad and Tobago, for other countries as well, you know. And President Trump especially has said, you know, whereas he has been restricting visas and he has
Yeah, well, all right, I think we're having some transmission issues. Let's see if we could get him back as soon as we can. But there are issues to continue to be pursued with the matter. Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean and Trinidad and Tobago and the U.S. What is likely to come of those, the views that some of us have. I'm using the royal us, not necessarily myself, but some of the people in Trinidad and Tobago have about the conduct of the government under the current Prime Minister, the side she's leading towards, to their, in a lot of cases, to people's discomfort and disagreement as to where we locate what should be a non-aligned country. A lot of people see us as that, although we are members of the founding members of what is now the CARICOM group of countries. But we'll take a break and come back. Stay with us.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, The Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
Welcome back to the program. The issue is Trinidad and Tobago, the Caribbean, Venezuela, and the U.S. Our guest, Ravi Bhargav Maharaj, whose writings, in some cases, on the issue found itself, or from themselves, I would say, as part of a bill going before the U.S. Congress. So let's talk with us a little bit, Ravi, then about, well, what does that do? Or what has it, is there an agreement you have as how some people are seeing it, that Trinidad and Tobago, well, the government, the current government is alienating Trinidad and Tobago from CARICOM in a great sense, in a decision that that has seen a greater nexus between us and the U.S. on one side, and on the other side, we have a sense in which a number of other Caribbean countries are on another side in relation to their relationship with the U.S. So some people are seeing it as, for whatever reason, politically or otherwise, Trinidad and Tobago has broken ranks from the Caribbean in preference to lining up with the U.S. on whatever policy decisions they are taking, not only for the Caribbean region, the Caribbean Latin American region, but internationally.
Well, no, I mean, you know, people from CARICOM are saying, that Trinidad and Tobago is breaking rank, but the argument can also be made that CARICOM is breaking rank from Trinidad and Tobago, because you might recall, I think it was in 2019, during President Trump's first term, there was a meeting that he called at Mar-a-Lago, I believe it was, where he had invited some of the Caribbean leaders who were part of CARICOM to come and meet with him. And famously, Trinidad and Tobago was left out of that discussion because the Prime Minister at that point in time, Dr. Keith Rowley, was not in agreement with what the U.S. were doing in terms of the sanctions, especially as it related to drug and gas and all of these things. So, Trinidad and Tobago were left out of the discussions at a time when CARICOM was in alignment and was in agreement with President Trump and were openly supporting him in his things. And now we have where the situation has kind of flipped, where CARICOM no longer supports the U.S., but our current Prime Minister, Kamala Kasabi-Sessa, does. So, and CARICOM has taken this position that whatever position that they have taken at a leadership level of CARICOM all member countries must fall in line and support that as well, even when they do not do anything to ensure that all member countries are being regarded in the same way that it would have done in 2019. So, I mean, it's a slippery slope. But again, because Kamala Persad-Bissessar is aligned with the US, I think, there is some protection there with how the US is perceived both regionally and internationally. There was some talk that Trinidad and Tobago may not be allowed into the UN Security Council, but the UN in itself right now is facing its own existential problems and credibility problems in terms of how they are being perceived. And so, all of these international organizations, I think, are at a point where they're trying to find credibility and they're trying to sustain themselves. Whereas countries need to look out for their people first and to do what is best for the people who have elected them to often and what's in the best interest of their countries. So it's very tricky what's taking place in global politics, but I think at the end of the day, both CARICOM and Mrs. Persad-Bissessar are doing what they think is in the best interest of their own organizations and countries, and we just have to see how it all plays out.
If there were to be a vote in Trinidad and Tobago, on the direction in which the government is going and has gone, what do you think will happen?
Well, there was a vote in June of last year. There was an election where, Kamala Persad-Bissessar, again, she came to the public and she was very open about how she felt about the entire situation, how she felt about President Trump, Venezuela, and all of these things. And the people came together and they voted in favor, voted against the PNM. So I think, I don't know that anything has shifted or changed to the extent where you would see, people backpedaling on that. Especially, it's only been a few months. So, really, I think the people still support, well, at least the majority of people still support what is taking place and appreciate the decisions that are being taken by the government.
On that issue, on our positions sort of regionally and then extra-regionally in the world at large, you think people who voted for the UNC have the same thoughts in mind as to how we have gone, or that these things weren't expected the way in which it appears that the current government, the current Prime Minister, is moving away from CARICOM solidarity for what one might call bigger fish and a greater sense of security with.
Well, I don't think we've moved away from CARICOM solidarity. I think, and Mrs. Persad-Bissessar has said this as well, we may differ in our opinion on this one issue, but CARICOM wasn't built on the issue of Venezuela. It wasn't built on the issue of the US. It was built on cooperation and collaboration between all countries on trade, on freedom of movement, and on culture. And I think all of those things are still in place. I think Trinidad and Tobago still collaborates and trades with CARICOM on a number of items. So there is no breakdown in CARICOM on those values. It's just that there is a differing opinion on this one issue. And if CARICOM wants to make it a larger thing and wants to dissolve themselves over this one issue, well, that's their prerogative. But I don't think that really and truly Trinidad and Tobago has isolated itself from CARICOM or has made a decision to pull out of CARICOM or anything like that. I think CARICOM remains strong and Trinidad and Tobago remains a strong member and a strong ally of it.
So you think what is happening now will blow over in due course, and CARICOM solidarity will prevail?
Well, yeah, and when you look at there are other elections taking place, and I think that other political parties and governments are seeing a shift in the paradigm of their countries as well, where people may be moving away from the persons who were there before, the persons who had a certain position regarding what's taking place in Venezuela. And they are also shifting their perspectives and alignments as well. So, over time, you might find that the leaders of CARICOM change when governments change, and CARICOM position would shift and align with Trinidad and Tobago moving forward.
Yeah, and you're talking about moving forward. What is your sense about, let's say, the elections, the most recent elections in Barbados, in which the lady has gotten a third term in office in 8 years. I want to deal with the 3 elections in 8 years on one side, but what is your sense about what is the magic?
No, well, I mean, she remains outside of her role as a Caribbean leader, and I think she has taken a leadership role in CARICOM and in the Caribbean. She's very well liked in her country, and she's someone who understands the need of her people, and she understands, how where Barbados fits into the larger scale of CARICOM, the region, and all of that, and she measures that against what she needs to do in her country to affect her voters. So yeah, I mean, politics isn't rocket science, really, and really and truly, when you see leaders and when you see governments falling out of favor with their people, it's because you have leaders who come in there with their own philosophies and ideologies and whatever. And then as time goes on, they shift out of alignment, or they aren't willing to recalibrate for how things are taking place, how the country has shifted, and how what people expect out of them, and that's when you see people getting upset and voting them out of government and whatever. Mia Mottley has, again, she has listened to her people. She's very popular both in the Caribbean and the country, so it's not surprising to see that she would maintain her position and maintain government going forward.
Yeah, you see, anything wrong. Wrong is not necessarily the most appropriate term, and I'm trying to find for it. But 3 elections in 8 years, when each term, it's 5 years, is up to 5 years. What's the magic there that she would see the need to call an election, with so much time remaining on the instant period?
Well, I mean, people call snap election. If you want to look at Barbados, you can look at UK, where you had elections. I don't know how much it was. It was probably about 4 or 5 in a decade, where you had prime ministers constantly coming in for a year or 2 and then being voted out. But in a small country like Barbados, sometimes, and again, it all goes back to listening to the people. You need to have a mandate. You have to have a clear mandate and a direction of what you're doing. And at some point in time, you have to go back to them and say, look, are we doing what you want us to do? Do you want us to change our direction, change our path, change our goals? And really, actually, you need that kind of reassurance from the electorate on what you're doing, especially if you are not sure in your own self. And, it's just things that happen. But the fact that she has been able to win the elections, even if she were to have an election every year, say every year we're coming back to you. If she wins the election every year, it means that she still has the support and confidence of the people. And I think that is the most important thing for her.
Yeah. And coming back home now, I don't know to what extent you're familiar with what was said to have happened on the Mark Crash show when the Caribbeans singing and the audio was lost, and that's topic number one as we speak, and it will be that for the next couple of days at least, as to whether it was something that was brought on the carriage at TTT, or I think the government's position is that it had nothing to do with it. The transmission failed, and so that's the discussion to some extent that is occupying.
Well, I'll tell you something. I can't say anything contrary to what the government has put out, and the government has said that it was a technical issue that caused the audio to drop. I will say it was very interesting that a minister within the office of the Prime Minister made a further statement and drew a parallel to an incident that took place when then opposition leader Kamala Prasad-Bissessar had gone to speak at the Diwali Nagar, and a similar thing took place where the audio feed, or it may have been the audio, it may have been the video, cut out on TTT as well. And, there were issues of whether or not it was censorship taking place by the government. So, but these things occur. And if people think that there is an issue, well, maybe the opposition, the PNM, should probably try to raise it to Parliament. But we can't really say anything that is contrary to what the government has said, which is the official position, that it was an issue, and we have to kind of take them at their word, isn't it?
Okay, I thought you were going to say something else, but so.
Oh, no, yeah.
Yeah. What for you continues to be some of the issues that the government should address, must address?
Issues regarding this?
Well, the governance in the country. No, the governance in the country at the moment. What some of the things you may have a list as to how much attention should be paid.
Well, in terms of governance, I will say that something that people come up to me and raise, and I think this is the major burning issue right now, is what is taking place with the road, the fixed penalty notices for traffic offenses. Yeah. And a lot of people think that it may be harsh, the penalties, especially as we've had 2 increases in the amounts of fines that are being presented to people who may not be complying with the law of the road. A lot of people, again, they think they're harsh. And on top of that, there are 2 categories of infractions with regards to traffic offenses. That in people's minds, there's the ones that you do deliberately, and then there's the ones that less deliberate, let's say. And the ones that, people look at in terms of deliberate acts, things like speeding and, not having insurance, not having a driver's license. And those issues, people have less of a problem with those being enforced and those having higher fines, because those are things that you deliberately do, where you don't go and get insurance for your car, or you speed on the road, and those could have consequences. In terms of issues like, you might have a light that's blown, you might have a oil leak in your car, things that can be corrected and that the driver may not even be aware of. These are issues that, they have a real problem with the fact that fines are going up, and they feel like they're being punished rather than it being something that, is really just a penalty for these things. They feel that the punishment is too severe. So I think in terms of governments, they just need to look at how they issuing laws in terms of the ones that affect people, like the traffic penalties. They have to try to, not be so harsh on a mostly law-abiding arm of the public. So that's the good thing. But I think other than that, people really don't have an issue with the way that the country is being governed right now. So yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah. What I would say, this is either the ultimate or penultimate question. What for you is a big issue that has to be addressed?
For me, probably the biggest issue, and I think that it's something that people have been wanting for a long time now, is constitutional reform. I think there are some outdated laws, I think that especially in terms of the way that the government is structured, the public service, other organizations within the government, you have these independent committees and all of these independent commissions. I think, people really want change in how the government is structured, how the country is governed, some of the laws. This is something that we've wanted since, I would say, the early 2000s. There's been a real push for constitutional reform. I don't know if any government could do it because, again, you need a certain majority within parliament that they do not have, especially in the Senate. So, but realistically, I think that is still the pressing issue. And until it is addressed, I think people will be clamoring for it and hoping that one day that will come up.
All right, my friend, we're going to have to leave it there. Ravi Bhargavan Maharaj, thank you very much.
Sure, and thanks again for having me.
You're very welcome. This has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
WESN.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color dry sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.